I'm not sure how this thing is supposed to work. So anyway, we could just read some comics for a while. I'm a big fan of that. See, I've got this lovely little comic book nook in here. And, what's this? Look, it's an issue of Net Magazine I talked about web animations in. Isn't that great? Maybe I should change this to let's talk about comics. But technically, I'm supposed to, this is a good series. Technically, we're talking about web animations today, and I was wondering if anyone on the interwebs had any questions that I could answer in this ridiculous thing called Periscope. Let's see, how can you ask me questions? Well, you can ask me questions on the Twitters, because you found me via Twitter, so you can ask me more questions that way. What would you like to know about web animations? Or animation in general? Alright, so Periscope doesn't really... Oh, there we go! Hey, Peter! I was just talking to Peter a few days ago. He's I Hate Tomatoes on the Twitters. And he says, what's new with the web animation API? And another person asks, do I think Flash will ever go away completely? The answer to whether or not Flash will go away completely ever, no. There's always going to be some legacy education application for it out there somewhere. And people still use Flash for actual animations. For instance, My Little Pony's Friendship is Magic, that's done using Flash. And so long as people are using Flash and the tool itself exists, Flash will be very much with us. And there's even an interactive interactive comic book I really love, Black Brick Road of Oz, where most of the interactive pieces are done in Flash for lack of a really good HTML5 authoring tool. So it'll probably be around for a very, very, very long time, as the software still has a commercial application and is within the grasp of users everywhere to burn their fingers off. But if browsers start, how do you put it? If browsers say, hey, we're not gonna ever allow Flash plugins ever again, you may be seeing less of it in browsers in the future. So that's kind of a roundabout way of saying Flash will always be with us, but it won't always be in our browsers. So someone asks, how can we get more HTML5 animations into web comics? So how do we do that? Well, we need better authoring tools. I faced this question myself at the beginning of the year and came to the conclusion that the state of authoring tools online for HTML5 animations is really shit. It's partly because the web animation API hasn't come into its own yet. And by coming into its own, I mean hasn't received it. The spec is being published. There's not a whole lot of information on how to use it out there, which I'm going to be getting to very shortly. And there's not a whole lot of instigation to create a tool for making interactive webcomics. I mean, Flash was both an animation publishing tool and a web content publishing tool, and now it's only one of those things. You take a lot of risks when you create a GUI for something like that. What format are people going to use? Adobe Edge Animate, but on jQuery, and has a reputation of not being that performant right now. But on the bright side, jQuery is supposed to get some major animation improvements in the near future, so that's exciting. Maybe that means Edge Animate won't be the pigeon in the family anymore. But at the same time, when you take a GUI, you're buying into a lot of frameworks, a lot of overhead. It's not going to necessarily be the most performant because it creates a lot of extraneous code. Anybody who's ever used Dreamweaver to build a site knows this. Visual editors do not mean nice, maintainable code. But we might see more people using Adobe Edge Animate to make interactive comics in the future as the jQuery becomes more performant and as Adobe pushes it more to the creative community, if Adobe so chooses to. We never know when Adobe is going to be like to some of these experimental features. So let the masses decide. Someone asks, what do I think about, this is the same person, S.A.J. Clark, what do I think about Madefire? Oh, hello, Murmur from Spain. Madefire, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a motion comics tool and publishing platform. Motion comics are like interactive comics, except you don't interact with them. They're kind of like glorified animatics. You can add sound, and shit can move. Woo! Oh, and thank you. Good to see Barbados is checking in. And yes, I hear Barbados has great beaches. So the problem with motion comics is that there have been a lot of motion comics tools and platforms in the past. They've never really caught on. It's always been a nice to have, but not mission critical. People are as likely to buy a graphic novel as they are to buy a motion comic. In the same way, they're as likely to go see a regular movie as they are to see a 3D movie. After the novelty wears off, you'll see declining rates of income from these more immersive features. Motion comic doesn't offer anything that a pure animation can't, and a graphic novel would often be good enough. So without that interactive component, motion comics kind of fall flat. Also, my problem with Madefire is I don't think there's a way you can get your comic back out of the system. Alright, consider that your, how do you put this? Consider that your, you make this comic, you make it so it's going to be cool, it's got motion, it's got sound effects, it looks really nice, like a semi-interactive animatic, and then Madefire collapses. Oh no, another tech startup collapsed. Wow, big wow. How do you get your content back out? And how do you sell it without the Madefire platform? How do you even show it without the Madefire platform? Does it export to HTML? Can you put it on a website? It doesn't have, from what I can see, there's no real exit plan. And when I'm thinking about publishing things, I don't know about you guys, but I look for an exit plan. I worry about publishing to proprietary formats. It's not like you're releasing something for the Nintendo DSi, where once it's on the DSi, you can pretty much rest assured it's going to get sold out there. It's like, well, can this be ported to other platforms? If it's only good for this one platform and it can't port to anything else, you might be putting all your eggs in one basket. If DSi sales don't go well, good luck with finding another platform that has a touch screen. Okay, we have some questions on the Twitters. Do you think animations will ever be used for cinematic animation, i.e. Disney, Pixar, etc.? I'm assuming this person is asking about web animations being used for in the cinema. Probably not, because I tried to submit some of the work I've done to an animation film festival, and we had an awfully interesting time trying to figure out how to get it out of the browser and onto the screen. There are much better tools, often developed in-house by companies like Disney and Pixar. They don't need the web. They're never going to use the web. Bye-bye. All right. Let's see. We've got some... Wow, okay, so there's a lot of stuff happening on Twitter, but not much of it is questions. And I just seemed to have looked away from the camera and missed a few more questions. So about that web animation API. Oh yes, and if you are interested in publishing your own webcomic, there is a theme for WordPress called Comics Press. It's pretty badass. Now, that web animation API. So, Web Animation API, I declared it the month of Web Animation API. We are now halfway through that month, and we haven't heard much about the Web Animation API. I'll take that blame. So, there are a lot of really cool posts that are going to come out in the next Web Animation Weekly, all about the Web Animation API. There have been some really good tutorials coming out, and I'm actually working on a series of tutorials and the documentation for the Web Animation API over at MDN, the Mozilla Developers Network. It's really exciting. You're the first to know about it publicly. because it's kind of private. I've been telling people in private, but I'm really nervous about talking about these kinds of projects because it's kind of like it will be jinxed if I tell you that I'm working on a project. It may never see the light of day, and then I'll lose a lot of face for that. But I think at this point, with this being the month of web animation, that it's going to happen. So I'm excited about that. Oh, also, what is the next conference I'll be speaking at? Well, I happen to be speaking at Future of Web Design in San Francisco at the end of October, and you should totally come and take my workshop on web animations. It's the masterclass of CSS animations and transitions, and it also delves into motion design, the sorts of things that you need to know if you're a front-end developer at a company that needs to start putting animation first. Wait, that might be a bad sign to the Australians. Hold on a moment. No, wait, I think this is a bad sign to other people. Here we go. Yeah. The heart. You can't go wrong with the heart. Whew. All right. Oh, sorry, I've offended the Irish now, too. Hand signals are so wrong. Oh, Peter says he'll be on Periscope later today, deconstructing the new MailChimp Pro page. That's I Hate Tomatoes on Twitter, so keep an eye out for him. Probably I Hate Tomatoes on Periscope as well. And so Peter's pretty awesome. So go send him my love. And so someone said, Rachel, if I can't get to San Francisco, how am I going to figure out all this stuff? That's a very good question. How do you learn more about motion design if you can't make it all the way to San Francisco and pay to go to my very good workshop and or watch my talk? Well, I was gonna post a web animation and motion design workshop online, but I haven't yet because I have so much work to do that doing the filming is very hard. But if you're not already subscribed, I do recommend subscribing to Web Animation Weekly at webanimationweekly.com because we constantly, when I say we, I mean I and all the good readers who submit links every week, we're constantly posting the best that the internet has to offer in terms of motion design and tutorials. It's not all motion design. There's a good deal of it that's like, this is how you do a prototype with Keynote. It has absolutely no motion design basics in there. I also did an article for A List Apart that gets into the basics of motion design. You can find it at my site. If you go under writings, there's a great big old list of things that I have published for Smashing Mag, for A List Apart, for 24 Ways. Dig through there, some awesome tips, and those articles link out to other articles. So right now, there's not a one-stop shop, although between you and me, I'm going to be working on that. But I can't say too much once again because jinxing it, but I assure you it will be free. Yes, free, as in you're not going to have to go buy a book from a publisher or a workshop, and it will be awesome. But I'm working on that tonight with a friend who is awesome and has offered to help me with it, so... Alright, I've also been working on this thing called the Declaration of Animation for us in web design, because one of the things I've been saying is we've been doing a lot of looking to our bigger brothers and sisters in other communities. Like we've been looking at the motion designers from cinema, we've been looking at native app designers, we've been looking at traditional studio animators, we've been looking at game designers and animators, and we've been drawing a lot, like the 12 principles of animation and well, this is how it's done on iPads, and we're trying to learn a lot from our bigger brothers and sisters who use animation every day in other industries. But when it comes down to it, we do things differently on the web. We have interaction, whereas cinema does not. We have accessibility issues that we can address in ways that native does not. There are things that we can do and that we prioritize that these other industries do not. And that's both wonderful and kind of frightening, because it means there's a lot of ground we haven't covered yet that we're going to have to cover. And we have to learn all over again from the start. And there's also all kinds of private research that the big companies, the operating system developers like Windows and even Apple have done that they're not sharing back from the early 90s. Research that we're going to have to do for ourselves, but also on the bright side, kind of outdated research. So yeah, people use digital devices a lot differently than they did back in the 90s. But at the same time, we're kind of on our own. But once again, what the web does is we share. In game development, people learn how to animate a lot by understudying other people. In animation school for studio animation, people learn by drawing furiously under mentors. A lot of information is not documented. It is not shared beyond a paywall or a long and hard apprenticeship. What do we do best in web development? We share, and we teach, and we train, and that's what we're great at. And that's what I mean when I say that web animation, it's going to draw a lot from what's come before, but it's also going to be its own beast. There's a lot of stuff that we can do that other industries haven't or can't, and that is both an opportunity and a crisis. But we're all in this together, right? Carl Doyle asks, I can't draw, should I be here? Carl, do you use animation in your user interfaces? Carl is not replying. I'm going to assume that Carl has stepped into the wrong room. It's alright, you can hang out, Carl. All are welcome here. This is the web. We are welcoming, and sometimes we're trolling bastards. But, all right. Someone asks AngularJS or React.js. I don't care. How about either or? Neither? I tend to use flat files like Jekyll and then strap on something like smooth state.js that does push state and also Ajax to take just the information on the page that you need to change and then animate between them. Everything has its place. If you're working with a pre-existing foundation, like say your company's site is run with Drupal and you're like, I want stateful transitions when people go from one page to the other, or when people are navigating through the nav, that's when I highly recommend to use, instead of having to go up and convince your boss, we need to use React.js, your boss would be like, what? No, we're not going to overhaul a system that works perfectly fine just so you can have some animations. That might be where you might be like, hey boss, what about smooth state.js? And your boss might be like, what's the dev time on that? So that's it's nice because it can take a perfectly flat site and it can make it work. Also, because you're using the flat files, assumingly that means that browsers that should mean that it should work out on very well for search engines to crawl your site still, because it's just a little JavaScript strap-on and doesn't rely on JavaScript to fill everything. What is the dev time on that? I don't know, because I've built everything from scratch using it. It's not that hard to implement from scratch. It shouldn't be too hard to strap it on at the end either. Do we need something better than ComicsPress for the future of webcomics? ComicsPress is the lowest common denominator. It's kind of like Drupal or WordPress. It's always going to be with you. There will always be room for better, but you're going to end up with very niche uses for that. Sort of like React and AngularJS have taken off because there are big companies and app-like web systems that have enough people that they can afford to pay to work on that. Comics is a very tiny industry. It doesn't have a lot of money floating around in it. People don't make a lot on it. And I don't think it could afford the dev time required to create a system that's better than ComicsPress. So ComicsPress is probably still very much the future of webcomics. I know we're talking about comics and animations right now, but interactive comics, they involve web animations. These are all valid. There are no stupid questions. Well, there are, but I won't answer those. What do I think of VR on the web? I don't know what I think about VR on the web yet. Let's find out. I have a friend who does virtual reality work, but she usually works with Oculus Rift. She's Kaori Ino on the Twitters. It's the Japanese spelling. It's an underscore between Kaori and Ino. She's pretty cool. She runs her own company. It's all VR. It's super high tech. I love it. So this has been an awful lot of fun, and it is time for me to get back to reading comic books. Oh, I'm gonna go. I have to get some things ready before Hack Night tonight when we work on that special surprise for everybody. Yeah, keep an eye on the Web Animation Weekly for the next couple of weeks. That's webanimationweekly.com. So sign up. Keep your eyes on the prize. And I will see you next time, good friends. Ta!